now I got to tell you this story, which I've cried every time I've told it. Because it's the 250th anniversary for our country. And I'm excited about that. I'm so excited about that because America is an underdog story. I mean, we should have never happened, but we did, and I love that. This is just one out of millions of stories, but I'm going to read it to you the best I know how. You ready? She ran barefoot behind a plow. 11 months later, she outran Hitler's empire. 1936, the world was watching Berlin. Adolf Hitler intended to use the Olympic Games to prove his theories of racial superiority to the world. In Missouri, during the crushing weight of the Great Depression, 18-year-old Helen Stevens, can I show Helen? Got a picture of Helen, there she is. Yeah, she's a champ. Had never owned a pair of running shoes. The Stevens family farm had no running water, no electricity, no money for luxuries like running shoes. Helen built her strength pushing a steel plow through hardened earth and built her endurance chopping wood before sunrise. Her high school had no girls' track team, no budget at all for female athletics. She ran because running was free. In the spring of 1935, her PE teacher, Burton Moore, watched her sprint 50 yards on a dirt path behind the school. When his stopwatch stopped, he had to check it twice. She had just tied the world record on a gravel road with no shoes. A year later, Helen qualified for the U.S. Olympic team. Getting to Europe, however, was a different challenge. The Olympic Committee provided minimum funding for women's track and field. Female athletes were largely expected to pay their own way. But the town of Fulton, Missouri, refused to let their champions stay home. Citizens collected pennies in coffee cans. Local merchants donated what they could. They raised just enough to buy her a ticket on the SS Manhattan. During the 9-day voyage across the Atlantic, Helen jogged on the wooden deck to stay in shape while wealthier passengers who were living above deck looked on in amusement. In Berlin, she looked nothing like the European athletes in their polished, state-funded training programs. She was a farm worker among international elites. She had no professional coaching, no sponsorships, none of their refinement. She only had speed. August 4th, 1936, 100,000 spectators filled the concrete tiers of Berlin's Olympic Stadium. Military brass bands played relentless marches. Giant banners with swastikas hung from the upper decks. The defending 100-meter champion was Stella Walsh of Poland, the woman Helen had defeated just once before. The German crowd expected their own athlete, Kathy Kraus, to win. Adolf Hitler watched from his private box directly above the finish line. Helen Stevens walked to the starting line. Lacking mechanical starting blocks, she knelt down and dug her footholds into the cinder track by hand. The pistol fired. By the 50-meter mark, she had pulled ahead. The roar of the German crowd began to fade into an uncomfortable silence. She crossed the finish line in 11 and a half seconds, a world record that would stand untouched for 24 years. Following her victory, accusations surfaced. The Polish Athletic Federation filed a formal protest claiming no woman could physically run that fast. Olympic officials entertained the claim and required Helen to undergo a medical examination to verify her sex. She submitted to the invasive procedure. They confirmed she was a female and handed her clothes back with no apology. It had taken her 11 and a half seconds to win the gold medal. It took her over an hour for them to let her keep it. She returned to Missouri a few weeks later. In 1936, there were no million-dollar endorsements or professional leagues. She played exhibition basketball to pay rent and served in the U.S. Marine Corps during the Second World War, and eventually took a job at the Defense Department, where she quietly worked in St. Louis for 30 years. Her world record stood until 1960. Highly unlikely. That's what God does. He takes those of us who have no business doing anything great, and God says, that's the kind of person I want to use. I want to use the person who's unlikely. As the worship team comes back up here, let me remind you of the gospel. Here's what the gospel says. It doesn't matter about your pedigree or even your character. The gospel says that we are all lost. We've all rebelled. We've all walked away from a relationship with God, and that God, in spite of all that, has come near to us in Jesus Christ, Jesus who paid the price for our redemption.